in my arms when I want you, and all your charms whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream, dream, dream,
Hello everybody, and
dream.
welcome back to another episode of What Woody's Watching. This episode is going to be about The Handmaid's Tale Season 5. I will start spoiler-free as always. I'll do a minute or two if you haven't seen the show at all, just to give you an idea of what it's about and my opinions on it. First things first, I highly recommend it. I will get into a bit of spoiler-free stuff for people who've seen up to Season 4 who haven't seen the most recent season, and then we'll get into full spoilers. Okay, so starting off, I will say this show I think is great. I really like it. It doesn't just feel like a feminist money grab, which a lot of things feel like that. They do a reboot of something with an all-female cast or whatever. They make, even if it's a new show with an all-female cast or writers or something like that, just to say that they're doing a women-centered show, I don't think is really beneficial for the most part. But this show is great. Of course, it's based on a novel by Margaret Atwood, which came out a long time ago and has had other adaptations before it. This one I think is really good. I think it's high quality. It's on Hulu in the USA. It's on Disney Plus in other countries. And I think it's great. The storytelling is really good. The characters are really good. It goes a lot farther than the book. So if you have read the book and haven't seen the series, and the book did have a sequel that came out recently, and I'm not sure how much of the series has now been based on the book. I think the second book came out after season 2 or 3, so I think part of the popularity of the TV show kind of encouraged the author to write the sequel. And yeah, so I'm not sure how many details or how many plot points they might have then gone back to draw from the sequel novel, as the show was already going on past the novel. But I think it's really good. So if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. I think if you're into things, even I wouldn't say it's similar to Game of Thrones, but I definitely think it's that kind of drama. There's a lot of political drama. It's a much smaller story. It's more concentrated on the character herself, played by Elizabeth Moss, June Osborne, aka Offred at the beginning. And she is, trying to survive, trying to fight back, and trying to navigate her life in this world. So it's not like a whole big political conspiracy thing, but obviously politics is involved, and as the show gets on, it gets into a bit more about politics. So yeah, I really enjoy it. If you've listened to some of my stuff before and you're interested in some of the stuff that I like, especially some of the drama that I've mentioned before, I think you'll really enjoy this. So now I'll get into things up to season 4, spoiler free for season 5, but I'm expecting you to have seen everything before this. So if you haven't seen the show at all, please go watch it. Now if you've seen the show but haven't seen the most recent stuff, then I'll say this season is, of course, it's kind of different because now we know that June has escaped Gilead and she's in Canada. She's reunited with her husband. I think he's a really good character, although them two together don't seem like a great match, because he in the others, they just seem like maybe she's changed because of Gilead, of course, which is totally understandable, but their relationship through this season seems a bit like it should be straining more than it is. Like they seem totally happy with each other, but they are at odds with each other for a lot of the show, and I'll get into some more detail about it later, but that's kind of my take on it. That's kind of what I noticed. And I do really like a lot of the other characters. Commander, what's his name? Commander Lawrence, yes, played by Bradley Whitford, and Nick, played by Max Minghella. I really like them as characters and what they're doing within Gilead, how they're trying to change things, how they're, increasing their influence and their power within it, and whether Lawrence is a good guy or a bad guy, or it's someone kind of in the middle who doesn't really care about everything, right? So I think he's a really interesting character. And Nick still has a lot to do with this show. I think he was gone for a while in season 3 or season 4. He was gone for a while, right? And he only came back like at the end. I don't know if that was just part of the story always, or if the actor just wasn't available for a while. So there's that. But he's in almost every, maybe every episode, if not almost every. He's constant throughout this story. So it's interesting to see how, since he's risen through the ranks in Gilead, how he interacts in this season, and how Commander Lawrence does as well. And his plans for Gilead are quite ambitious. I think it's really interesting. I'm excited to see how it happens with season 6, although there are some things about the kind of influence and the power that he has that I think are a bit contradictory, as well as with a few other things, which I will mention when we get into the spoilers. But for now, it's just, for example, I'll say with Fred Waterford, like when we see the flashbacks of pre-Gilead, he was coming up, or early days Gilead, and he was trying to come up with, this country. He was like a founding father of Gilead, and he came up with the name of the ceremony for, when they rape the handmaids. And he seems so integral and so fundamental to the creation of this country. And then, in season 3, when they go to Washington, D.C., and that's the capital of Gilead as it was in the USA. And it seems like all these people who are so important, Commander Lawrence, the architect of Gilead, Fred Waterford, he came up with the name of the ceremony. He was clearly involved from the beginning and hugely important to founding this country. And then they go to Washington and they don't seem that important. Of course, they put on a huge show to, get the baby back, which they never do. And it seems like he was sometimes shown to be this huge, important guy. Obviously, he has a relatively high position in Boston. But then they go to Washington and all these other people have 3, 5 handmaids or whatever. And relatively, it just seems like sometimes these characters don't mean that much. Fred isn't the top dog in Boston even. And then other times it seems like they're supposed to be really important people. And with Commander Lawrence as well, he's the architect of Gilead, of Gilead's economy. He convinces so many things on their national policies. And in season 5, as I mentioned, you see him grow his character, his power. And at the same time, there are some things it just seems like sometimes it shows him he has all this power, he has all these ideas, and these other characters are doing so much to influence Gilead as a whole. But then at the same time, something else happens where you're like, oh, this person isn't the guy, or isn't that important in Gilead. So it's I don't really know what to think about that. But it doesn't take away too much. It's just one of the things that I kind of find a bit confusing about the show. I've pretty much always felt that way kind of since season 1. So that's kind of where I stand on that. And yeah, with June herself, she evolves, of course, over this season, and she's interesting, trying to figure out what she's doing now that she's out of Gilead. And I was a bit worried because it's a shame to see shows go on too long when they don't know what to do. They can't organically write the story to basically make sense. Because when you have a show like this, which is about people escaping an oppressed nation, people rebelling and escaping from an oppressive nation, then once they escape, what do they do? So it's how are they going to write another season, another 2 seasons? They have already said season 6 will be the final season, which I think is a good thing, because this season can build into that, and then season 6 can wrap it all up. So they're already planning how to end it. I don't know if they've started filming or not, season 6. But yeah, they could have led into that, and then they could plan the ending rather than going and going and going until it's not so popular anymore, and then just ending it on a terrible season. So I think this season benefits from that, and I think it's good. You can kind of see where things are going, and I appreciate that, and I'm hugely excited for season 6. Even though season 5 wasn't my favorite season, I'm definitely excited for the final season. So that's what I have to say about that, spoiler free. If you haven't seen it yet, I definitely still highly recommend it. Please go see it, watch it, recommend it to other people. I think it's a really good show, and I think it's in terms of shows and media that tries to generate a discussion on sexism and feminism and things like that, I think this is one of the, if not the best one out there. Of course, it's showing a very extreme outcome of things, but it also asks a lot of questions and brings up a lot of topics that are still concerns in kind of everyday life. And it explains a lot of the sentiments a lot of people are feeling about a lot of things. So yeah, let's get into it then. Spoilers for season 5. If you've seen it all, then keep listening. If you haven't, go watch. Now, like I said with the people, like in this episode or this season, Commander Lawrence is like he's got this plan for New Bethlehem. He says he's been working on it for a while, and how does he have the authority to make this? I understand he's an important guy, but then again, why isn't he in Washington, D.C.? And who are these people in Washington, D.C. that they visited so briefly that supposedly have so much more power? Lawrence seems to be in control of so many things in this season. And throughout the season, he gets more powerful, right, when they get rid of Commander Putnam. So I guess I'm just a bit confused about that. And where does Nick fall into it? He becomes a commander. How much power does he have? He was able to be part of the plot to kill Commander Waterford, but he's not super powerful. Like, it's just one of those things. Everything seems a bit kind of confusing with the power structure, as well as, like, even back in the beginning, I was a bit confused. Is this a revolution within America? Did the USA change to become Gilead? Or did Gilead rise up and kick out the people? It seems to be kind of a mix of both, because they had things like suspending the Constitution because of the terrorist attacks and blah, blah, blah. But if that's the case, like, then why are they at war with the USA? Why is there still a USA government? Why is there all this other stuff going on? I don't really understand. Is it supposed to be a changed country or a new country that kicked the USA out? And just from what I see from all the flashbacks and everything they show, it seems like there's details that would lead me to believe both of those. And it's a bit annoying. Kind of wish they would stick to one or the other. But it's, it's not really central to the show. I still think the show's great. But with this season, June was a bit inconsistent, I would say. Like, I guess a lot of things. And I think her relationship with Luke is like, I don't really know how they still love each other that much. Like, she seems so obsessed with Gilead, and I understand she's been through a traumatic experience. I totally understand that. And Luke is doing so much to be there for her, and it's great. But I feel like June is often, like, just neglecting him, and everything he says, she kind of ignores and just does her own thing, because it's like, oh, Luke, you don't understand. And I agree, he doesn't understand what she's been through. But at the same time, it's like she keeps going off on her own to do things and do this and put things at risk. Like, she's doing things like everything, like Luke says, like, how, if you go to prison or if you go to Gilead or whatever, if something happens, how are you going to help us? How does this help Nicole? How does this help Hannah if you're doing this or that or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, like, take a step back, just stop and think for a minute. So, consider how you can do this. You're out now with one daughter, which of course, it's not enough, but you gotta realize the position you're in and how you're gonna fight a whole country. So it's a challenge, I know, but it just seems a bit, like she's always trying to get more extreme with things, and then it's like, oh, she realizes, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not caring about Nicole as much as I should be. She takes a step back, and then the next episode, Serene does something that pisses her off, and she goes berserk again, and then she comes back, and it's like I don't really know what they're doing. So that's my opinion on that. Nothing too crazy. It hasn't turned me off from the show or anything. I still really enjoy the show, but it just seems like the difference between the two characters is pretty great, and yeah, it's almost like, their relationship should be more strained, but it doesn't really seem to be that way, despite the fact that they argue in almost every episode. They end up like not having any problems with each other. So yeah, there's that. Emily was gone in this season. As I understand it, the actress could not do this season. I don't know for what reason, but she wasn't available, or she decided not to come back, and so they just basically wrote her out, said she went back. I would be curious to see if she comes back for season 6. I doubt it. I'm not going to hold my breath for it because I don't want to expect something and not get it. But yeah, so that's a bit of a change, and it's a bit disappointing to see that they just had to, kind of write her out so suddenly like that. But I think it is certainly possible. Like, you see someone who's been in this oppressive state and they escape and they're traumatized and they just feel like the only thing they can do is go back. And I think that's something, like, obviously this isn't the same, but through my experience with the military, it's like, it's a very stressful environment to live and work in, and you don't like it most of the time, but when you're away from it and you find yourself thinking about certain memories and you're like, this is something I gotta do, like, I understand the draw that something like that can have. Something that you didn't really like, but it's interesting. Yeah, and was it Janine? Janine survived the bombings, right? I don't remember if they showed her. I think they must have showed her at the end of season 4, right? After the bombs came to the city, when June got out and Janine didn't. But yeah, she's found a life again with Aunt Lydia. I think Aunt Lydia is great. She's probably my favorite character. I think she's fantastic. The actress, let me get her name for you. She's fantastic. I love watching her. All her scenes are fantastic. Aunt Lydia, played by Anne Dowd. And the young wife who they had stayed with when they were trying to escape, right? When they were hiding, played by, I'll get her name. She's the young popular actress. She's up and coming. She was in the new Ghostbusters movie. McKenna Grace. The character Esther Keyes. Yes. Their interaction with Esther and Janine is interesting. And I don't know if they're going to show Esther again in season 6. They kind of just stopped talking about her all of a sudden. Because obviously, she poisoned herself and Janine, so that's not good. But it's interesting to see how these different characters have different reactions to their situations. Like, Janine is very much just, in kind of an autopilot, trying to survive, doing what's asked of her. And Esther is, totally resentful for everything. She hates everything that's happening. And, as she should. But it's just, it's cool to see how these different characters have different reactions. Not everybody just wants to straight up rebel and be like June Osborne. They have that even in, I think in season 1, there was one of the handmaids who was like, look, I was in a bad place before. they give me a house, they give me food, blah blah blah, and she's okay with it. And it's just cool to see that there's different personalities within the society. Makes everything kind of more realistic, more human. And getting to the end, the American refugees have overstayed their welcome in Canada, which is, kind of understandable. I'm surprised almost that they didn't mention these things earlier, because I imagine Toronto, especially so close to the USA, is super crowded now that it's been several years and lots of people have escaped, and I'm sure it creates a lot of issues that people weren't expecting, to have such a sudden influx of refugees. Because the USA is over 300 million people. So when a lot of those people are trying to escape a new oppressive government, then that could be life-changing for anyone who lives in Toronto. Just having to live through that experience as the city and the country of Canada tries to adjust to it. But I think it's interesting the way they show Gilead gaining ground with the sentiments, with the gaining support from the people in Canada. I think the people in Gilead were very smart with what they did. I think Serena was very smart with Fred's funeral and with the fertility clinic, fertility center, showing them this is how we have children and this is what makes us good, instead of focusing on all the things about Gilead, because Gilead is inherently, all of a sudden, it's political arguments, it's something people don't like, and you can't really win people over with that. Whereas if you say, look, we're having babies and nobody else is, I think that's like a stroke of genius. And to see some of the people getting into that, and to see the Wheeler family, and then when you realize, I think for me it was when Mrs. Wheeler said go to your room to Serena, that's when I realized, and I think that's when Serena realized, I'm being treated like a handmaid. They're expecting this child to be theirs, and I'm going to be removed from the baby's life soon enough. And they try, and then she realizes she escapes. And I think that was kind of a turning point, because in the past few seasons, there are always moments where it was like Serena is kind of friendly with June, and they kind of, see each other's struggles. They kind of bond a bit, and they both want to kind of improve things together, but then all of a sudden Serena gets mean again, and they hate each other again. And even at the beginning of this season, of course, June kills her husband. And even though Serena wasn't the biggest fan of her husband by the end of season 4, then she's still rightfully mad, and she goes back to Gilead. She puts on this huge funeral and basically shoves it in June's face with her daughter. But then when she gets back and she's treated like a handmaid, that's the real problem. And I think that's a real turning point. And I think the very end, when you see them on the train together, I think that's definitely a big moment. And I think we could see them working together at this point going forward. So it'd be interesting to see how they handle that, if Serena is going to get in on the action and try to fight against Gilead, or if she's just trying to get away and save herself, or if she's going to be a secret informant, she's going to stay out of the spotlight but still help, or if she's going to be out there in the spotlight with June. I don't know. I'm interested to see where that goes. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention, the raid on the wife's school, the wife training center. I think it was really interesting the way they did it. The way it was as soon as they cross the border, the planes are shot down, and Commander Lawrence has it all kind of figured out. And he calls June and he's like, hey, why'd you do that? That was stupid. You should have just talked to me. And I think that's good for him. He's a smart character. But I was also really hoping that was the season finale. They show this raid, and I was hyped for an epic military scene but I think the way they did it was also good, because it's not a show built on action. So I think it would have been cool, really cool. It would have been really intense, really dramatic. But it's also, never really been part of the show. The show's never needed it before. I don't think it needs it now. So I think it was pretty cool to show that Commander Lawrence was so smart about all this. So yeah, I'm interested to see if they're gonna mention New Bethlehem again. Obviously, I was a bit worried at the end if June, when they felt the danger in Canada after June got run over and Nick beat up the guy, ended up killing the guy. I was curious if she was gonna say we need to go to New Bethlehem, like that's our only option. Obviously, they didn't say that. They're like, we're gonna go west. We're gonna go to Alaska or Hawaii, and I think that's the smart move. They should have done that like right away. But yeah, they get separated, June and Luke, and I guess Moira's staying by, of course, because she's not, wanted for killing a Canadian. But I think maybe the whole group of them could have left together. But we do see Luke and June split up again, and I'm sure they'll be reunited again. I'm hopeful that the court will be like, look, this dude tried to run over your wife, so you'll go to prison or something, but you're not gonna be locked away forever. Or maybe someone will help him get out and get to the States or whatever. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see if Lawrence prevails in season 6 and his reforms go through and Gilead basically becomes more or less a normal country that's had success in fighting climate change and fertility issues. Or if Lawrence fails and Gilead stays this oppressive regime, and somehow June and whoever else and the Americans come together to overthrow or get rid of the Gilead government or whatever it is. I'm really interested to see how they wrap this up, because this seems like larger than June's story at this point. Like, they could just show what happens to June and how she ends her story, but I think she's so involved with the fate of Gilead and America. So I think the show is kind of going towards a big finale where you see what happens to Gilead, what happens to all the characters. And what I'm really curious about is, does Gilead survive? Does Gilead change? Or does Gilead go away? I think that's kind of where the ending is pointing to. And of course, does June get Hannah back? And if she does get Hannah back, is she going to stop there? Maybe this series will end with her getting Hannah back, but then she's like, I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to make sure Gilead is gone or something. I don't know. I'm not going to theorize too much because I don't want to be disappointed when I'm wrong. So that's all I have to say about this. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. And as always, keep loving movies and TV shows. Goodbye.
What do you want from me? Why don't you run from me? What are you wondering? What do you know? Why aren't you scared of me? Why do you care for me? When we all fall asleep, where do we go?
Come here.
Say it, spit it out. What is it exactly? Your pain is the amount cleaning you out. Am I satisfactory? Today I'm